Laura, and I am so happy today. I'm in such a good mood, so it's the perfect day to film. Today is Thursday, the 1st of October, and I uploaded a video today, which was my October TBR. And while I was uploading that video, I realized that we have reached 700 subscribers. So I just wanted to say thank you guys so much. Thank you for joining the circus. Thank you for being here. I love each and every single one of you to pieces, and I'm just so glad that you're here. So today I'm going to be doing my September wrap up, and I just finished last night a book that made me so ridiculously giddy. I'm so excited to talk about it with you guys, but I'm going to save that book for the very end, so stay tuned. So this month I did a mid-month wrap up for the first 6 books that I read in the first half of October. They were these 6 books. So if you're interested in hearing more of my thoughts on these books, do check out my mid-month wrap up. So for the books that I ended the month with, I actually had 2 DNFs. So let's talk about those. The first one was Grimm. This is the short story collection that's edited by Christine Johnson. I read the first 5 stories, I think. Yeah, I read the first 5 stories, and I only liked one of them. And I know it doesn't, in a way, it doesn't really make sense to DNF a short story collection, because all of these stories are from different authors. So, I mean, even if I hated the first few that I read, which I did, you know, I could keep going in the hopes that I would get to a story that I would like, but I just didn't care anymore. First of all, I feel like I didn't get what I was promised, because it says, inspired by classic fairy tales, but with a dark and sinister twist. These did not have dark and sinister twists. A lot of them had happy endings, and I was just like, this isn't what I signed up for. I didn't want fairy tales. I wanted sinister retellings. I just didn't like this. The stories were just bad. So I gave up, unfortunately. The second book that I DNF'd happened later on in the month, and that was Girls of Storm and Shadow by Natasha Neon, and I'm really upset about this. I'm not upset, I'm just disappointed that I didn't like it. I really tried, guys. So if you remember, I started reading this back in May, and I got like 160-ish pages into it. I got up to chapter 16, and I wasn't enjoying it back in May, and I thought maybe I'm just not in the mood for it, so I read it. I tried to pick up exactly where I left off, and I wasn't enjoying it. I'm like, okay, maybe I need to go back and start it from the beginning. So I started like skimming from the beginning, and then I picked up again where I left off, and I just still wasn't enjoying it. I don't have any kind of emotional connection to these characters, any one of the characters in this book. I liked the relationship between the 2 main characters in the first book, but because the setting is so completely different, they're kind of on a journey now. I didn't like them outside of the main setting from the first book, so I don't know. And now I'm thinking about the first book and wondering if I really enjoyed it as much as I thought I did, you know what I mean? So yeah, I couldn't push through it, so I decided to go ahead and give up on this one as well. So those were my DNFs. Let's get into the books that I actually finished. The first thing I picked up completely on a whim was Jane Unlimited by Kristin Cashore. Not like completely on a whim, because if you saw my try a chapter tag, this was one of the books that I tried the first chapter of and decided to keep because I really liked it. This is an extremely weird book, and I don't even know how to describe it. But basically, we're following Jane, and Jane gets this invitation to go to this manor on this private island from her friend. What was her friend's name? Kiernan? I think? I don't remember. I hate when I can't remember character names. Was it Kiernan? Anyway, things are extremely weird at this house. There's people gone missing. There's like an art theft in progress. They're getting ready for this big spring gala, and like everything is happening at once. And so there's 5 different mysteries that Jane is discovering about the house, and the story eventually splits and she makes the decision to go in one of 5 directions. So we're following each direction, like she'll make one decision and go in one direction, and then we follow that lead to the end. And then we come back to the beginning point and follow the next direction as she makes a different decision and see where that leads her. And it's I don't even know how to categorize this book because there's so many different genres. So one decision that she makes, it'll turn into this spy thriller, and then the next decision she makes, it turns into this sci-fi story, and then the next decision is a portal fantasy, and the next is a horror. I really liked the horror one, actually. Yeah, so it's really interesting. It's really weird, and I did not know how I felt about this at first. I was just, there's also a female-female romance in here that was really, really sweet, and we kind of got to see the progression of that throughout each storyline, so that was fun. I liked this book overall. It was just so out there for me. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to expect, what was gonna happen next. Some of it was like ridiculous and over the top, like especially was it the sci-fi story? There were space pirates. In some stories it just felt really juvenile, but altogether it was really interesting. It was very interesting, and I do recommend this book. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. I didn't love it, but I appreciate what it did, and I don't know, it's just so weird. If you really like weird things, and it also has like this choose your own adventure type element, then you might really like this. There's also talking dogs, so just putting that out there. The next book I finished was The Toll by Neal Shusterman. This is the 3rd and final book in the Arc of a Scythe trilogy, and I really enjoyed my time with this one. I didn't know what to expect because the 3rd book in this series is so polarizing and a lot of people really don't like it. But I didn't get that. I really enjoyed my time reading this. I buddy read this with Angela, and I think the buddy read was actually really helpful in my enjoyment of this as well. So I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. There's really not much I can say about this because it is the 3rd book in a series, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the ending. I think that the ending, I couldn't have thought of a better ending myself. I wasn't expecting it to go the way it went. But it made sense once you went back and looked at things from the first 2 books. It made sense that this is where we were going. You know what I mean? The plot of this is really where it excelled. The world building, the AI, the Thunderhead itself. I really loved what it did, and I like the way it ended. So 4 out of 5 stars. I do recommend this series, and I'm really glad that I, you know, ticked off another series off my list. So the next thing I picked up was The Black Kids, and this is by Christina Hammonds Reed. This is a debut by her, and it follows our main character, Ashley Bennett, who is living a really charmed life. She lives in this upscale type neighborhood in LA. This takes place in 1992, and she is a Black girl living in a predominantly white neighborhood, with going to a predominantly white school, and she has always been just kind of one of the popular girls, and her family is very well off, and she's kind of never given much thought to things like race and othering and discrimination. Even though she's experienced it throughout her entire life, she's just been one of the girls until Rodney King happens. Rodney King is, back in 1992, was brutally beaten within an inch of his life by police officers, and those police officers went to trial for what they did, but they were acquitted. And after that happened, huge riots broke out all over LA. LA was literally burning. That ended up changing the way people, not only the way people viewed Ashley, but the way Ashley viewed her white friends and the people around her, and how they treated her afterwards, and how it suddenly became, instead of her being one of the girls, it became us and them. This book was beautiful. I really, really enjoyed it. Even though it's dealing with heavy topics. It's dealing with racism and police brutality. It's still mostly a coming of age type story, and it's also it's also like a love letter to Blackness and Black families and those girlfriends, those relationships that you have in high school that are like so emotionally heavy, exhaustive. I don't know if I'm getting the right word. And it's a love letter to Los Angeles itself. And I really appreciated that. I really appreciated the sense of hope in a time that was completely hopeless. And it also is holding up a mirror between 1992 and the riots that happened in LA to our current day here in 2020, the riots that happen today, as far as police brutality, as far as getting justice for the murder of Black lives. It kind of shows the similarities and how far we've come, which is really not far. Rodney King was like one of, if not the first case of police brutality being caught on film and having it go widespread for everyone to see with their eyes what is going on in the world. And it still ended up with no justice being served. And we're seeing that today, obviously, with what's going on right now. It was harrowing and just really freaking angering. And I read a note from the author. When she was writing this book, like, none of this had happened yet, you know, the things that we're going through now. It was just amazing that this book ended up being such a mirror between the past and the present. The writing in here was really exquisite. It was beautifully told. It was emotional and impactful and still so filled with Black love and hope. And I ended up really enjoying this book, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Highly recommend. Love to see what Christina Hammonds Reed does next, because like I said, this is her debut. So I'm really excited to see where she goes from here. Okay, so after I read that, I picked up The Devouring Grey. This was a reread for me. I reread this so that I could read the second book, the second and final book in the duology. So this takes place in a small town in upstate New York called Four Paths. And there were 4 founders of this small town. And these 4 founders have these powers, and they use those powers to protect the town from a monster that is contained in the Grey. The Grey is basically like this prison. It's this other dimension that is basically set up as a prison to house this monster. We're following the 4 kids that are part of the 4 founding families. Violet, who is a girl who just moved to the town and has no idea about any of this, about her own powers, about what her place is in this town. She moves in with her mother to kind of take care of her aunt, and she moved in right at a time where the Grey is growing stronger, the monster is killing more people, and the 4 of them have to come together to stop it. Of course, this was a reread for me. I absolutely loved it the first time I read it, and I loved it just as much the second time I read it. I was really worried that I wasn't gonna love it as much, but I loved it just as much, if not more, as reading it for the first time. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and then I moved on to the second book, which is The Deck of Omens. I loved the direction that this went in, and I loved the characters and all their drama, because really they have been through a lot. They're dealing with a lot of grief and a lot of trauma in some cases. The entire book was like the big battle. Do you know what I mean? It was intense, edge of your seat type stuff. Even though this was very action-packed and had a lot of that atmosphere and a lot of that tension, I didn't love it as much as the first one. And I can't really tell you what it was. I was gonna say there were some things that were a little repetitive, but I don't think that's it. I just feel like it didn't go as far as I wanted it to. I don't even know if that's right. I don't know how to explain my feelings for this, but I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I think that it was an excellent conclusion to the duology, and I think that it really revealed a lot of secrets and things that were going on about the town and about the how the monster originated and how the gray originated. Did a lot of interesting things that I really loved, but I still didn't love it as much as the first one, but I still really enjoyed my time. So 4 out of 5 stars for the second one, 5 out of 5 stars for the first one. I definitely recommend this duology. I enjoyed my time. It's so atmospheric, and it's like a perfect read for the autumn season. Sorry if the angle's different, I had to change my battery. But moving on, the next book I finished this month was amazing. It was When No One Is Watching by Alyssa Cole. I decided to pick this up because I just couldn't wait any longer. I was thinking about saving it for October, but if you saw my October TBR, you know that I already have a ton of books to read in October. This is a thriller by Alyssa Cole, and it follows a woman named Sydney Green, who is a young Black woman, Brooklyn born and raised, and she feels like her neighborhood is constantly changing. Every time she looks around, something is closing. Condos are popping up, her neighbors are moving out, and she's really upset about the gentrification of her neighborhood. But things start to take a very sinister turn when her neighbors start actually disappearing without warning, with these white people and white couples moving into their house as soon as they disappear. And she's beginning to think that something deeper is going on in the neighborhood than what she thinks. This book scared the crap out of me. It was so thrilling and chilling, and it almost had this, it did have this horror element to it, because the true horrors here are racism and white supremacy. It becomes the most scary thing ever. Like, this book, I would say it was very evenly paced, because it starts off pretty slow. It kind of builds and builds until you get to the end. But the thing was that you could tell that there was this dark, sinister undertone lurking in the book until we got to the big reveal, the big explosion. And it was so good. This was written so well. Like the first part of it, I would say, is like this romantic suspense with this dark undertone, and then the end is like full up horror. And it really scared me to the point where I had nightmares over this book. So just a warning, like it might just be me, but it terrified me so much. 5 out of 5 stars. I cannot believe that Alyssa Cole, romance author, wrote such an amazing and compelling thriller first try. She's incredible, and she is a romance author, like I said, so there is some romance in here, which is also a little sketchy, and it's just, oh god, it's the perfect amount of tension and surprise and twists and turns. It's a perfect book. It's a perfect book, and I loved it. 5 out of 5 stars. Go pick up this book right now because it's amazing. The next book I finished was Abaddon's Gate by James S.A. Corey. This is the 3rd book in the Expanse series, which is an adult sci-fi space opera series, and it's very political, very expansive. I don't know how else to describe these books. I try to describe them differently each time, but anyway. I didn't enjoy the 3rd book as much as I did the first 2. The first 2 I gave 4 stars. This one I gave 3 stars. It just felt like a lot of starting and stopping. It just wasn't paced well. There would be like these bursts of action, but then like these huge lulls. I didn't enjoy the characters that we were following as much as I did the characters in the first 2 books, because in each book we're following a different set of characters, although we have one character and one group of characters that are constantly in every book, but we get new different characters each time, and I just wasn't invested in these characters as I was in the other ones. This did do some interesting things, and ultimately I liked where we got to at the end. I liked the end result. I feel like, you know, yeah, we were waiting for that. So that was exciting, and that makes me excited to pick up the 4th book, see how that kind of plays out in the 4th book. So yeah, I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Not as good as the first 2, but I'm still excited to continue on with the series and see how it goes. So now we are at the final book that I read in September. Finished it just last night and still haven't fully like acquired my thoughts for this book. But that is A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. And just let's take a minute to appreciate the cover, okay? because it's gorgeous. This is completely different from what I thought it was going to be, and I think it's completely different from what a lot of us might have thought that it was going to be. So before I get into how much I love this book, let's talk about what it actually is. So I've heard a lot of other booktubers talking about this as a or describing it as an adult fantasy. It's not. This is definitely YA. We're following 16-year-old protagonists with a very YA writing style, which is not a problem. Also, I expected from the synopsis and kind of the way it was marketed and the way people were talking about it that it was going to have a much more atmospheric, dark, sinister feel, like it was going to be more of a thrillery type read, but no, it's not. This is YA fantasy through and through. Okay, so what is it about? In this book, we are following Galadriel. She is, or Elle for short, she is a wizard studying at the Scholomance. And the Scholomance is this school that has no teachers, no authority figures whatsoever. You are there, you do your work, or you die. You either, the only way to get out of this school is to make it through graduation or die. And even though that does sound dark and sinister, and like the school is also overrun with monsters that are constantly trying to eat you. So like everything about it is very dark and sinister, right? But it doesn't have that tone to it. It very much has like this wholesome tone, kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. Like I really don't know how to describe this book. But we're following Galadriel, who is our main character. She is a sophomore at this school, and she has an affinity for destructive magic. Basically, she is extremely powerful and has the ability and the power to completely wipe out the school and everyone in it. And she constantly has to constantly fight that within herself, because she could easily turn into this evil sorceress. So she doesn't tell anyone what her affinity is, and in fact she doesn't really have friends at the school because of the darkness about her. People kind of get this vibe from her and they stay away from her. Not only that, but she is a very prickly person. She's very snarky, she has an attitude, she's very angry, and I love her. I instantly fell in love with her as a character. She is perfect. This book is basically Hogwarts, but if Hogwarts didn't have any teachers, monsters were trying to kill you at every turn, you had to constantly watch your back, and it was full of 16-year-old snarky teenagers. That's what this is, and it's so good. The thing is that because I thought this was something completely different, it really wasn't what I was expecting. I didn't think that I was going to enjoy it being what it is, but oh, did I enjoy it. Like I said, it just made me giddy. Galadriel trying to make friends, and it has that kind of found family, wholesome feel to it as well, but it's also dark and mysterious and like and creepy in a way, and it's just so hard to describe. Like I don't even know if I'm doing it justice. I'm really not, because this book is so good. I loved it from page one. I was hooked. The characters will completely enthrall you and pull you in. The setting, the school, the world building in here was absolutely incredible. If you're wondering how there could be a school with no teachers, like how do the kids not just slack off? Like you'll understand it once you read this book. The world building is so good. You can tell that Naomi Novik put a lot of work into it because it's just so intricate. And I loved everything about this. This is basically like Harry Potter for an older generation with much more diversity. This is an international school, so there are kids coming from all over the world that get called to the Scholomance. Our main character, Elle, is half Indian, half Welsh, and it was just so fun exploring this school setting with a diverse female lead character. 5 out of 5 stars. This is another one of my favorite books of the year. I love Naomi Novik. She is definitely a favorite author now. I have read 3 of her books and loved them all, so I can safely say that she is a favorite author of mine, and I highly recommend you go pick up this book. It is amazing. I loved every second of it, and it's just so much fun. Like I said, it made me ridiculously giddy. It just made me happy. It was funny. Oh my god, our main character is so hilarious. She's just so sarcastic and snarky, and I love it. I loved it. I really don't know if that was coherent because I feel like all I said was I love that book. So those are the 8 books that I finished in the second half of the month with 2 DNFs. Do let me know down in the comments below if you have any thoughts or opinions on the books that I mentioned today. Please let me know in the comments if you're gonna go out and pick up When No One Is Watching or A Deadly Education, because if nothing else, those 2 books are the books that you need to go and read out of all the books that I mentioned today. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.